Well, let's pick up on that top story. And following the explosive allegations from former Eskom CEO de Ruyter, the Democratic Alliance wants detailed information. De Ruyter, during an interview with Annika Larsen, alleged that a high-placed ANC politician was aiding ongoing corruption at the power utility. Let's bring in the DA's Leon Schreiber now. Mr. Schreiber, thank you so much for joining us. Just overall, I would imagine you've watched the full interview. What are your thoughts?
Yes, good evening, Sally. I think that it is a very important moment, and I would welcome the courage of Mr. de Ruyter in actually blowing the whistle on the reality of the situation at Eskom. We must keep in mind that over the years, he has repeatedly attempted to have these kind of corruption allegations investigated. There have been numerous complaints that have been laid with the Hawks and others, to the point where someone like Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe was calling him a policeman. And I think that the failure of the state to take seriously those allegations means that it is now time to actually share with the people of the country what is going on there. And I think that that is ultimately what a public servant should do, not be intimidated by a political party and its operatives, and we've seen the response today from the ANC, but to actually put the public interest and the public's right to know why we are in stage 6 blackouts first.
And of course, as you say, de Ruyter has spoken out before about sabotage, about theft, about deliberate acts to undermine the power utility, the so-called coal mafia. We've heard about this before, but I think it went to the next level when he said in that interview that he spoke about 2 other politicians, about a high-level politician who was allegedly in on the game, involved in the corruption. That issue specifically is why you want this PAIA application brought. Talk to me about what that actually is and what information you're seeking and from whom.
Yes, so immediately once the first clips of this interview was circulated, we drafted a PAIA request, which I can confirm has now been submitted to Eskom, to obtain the name of this particular high-level politician, I think is the exact phrasing that was used, and all information, evidence relating to this particular case. Because if this is a situation, and we now have it on the highest authority from Eskom itself, that it is indeed the situation that a currently serving senior politician, presumably from the ruling party, is actually the kingpin behind things like the coal mafia, the syndicates in Mpumalanga that we've heard so much about over the years, then that is something that needs to be exposed to the people of South Africa, first of all. But secondly, also, that is information that we must use then to inquire from investigators why this person is still apparently serving in government, still freely walking the streets. Because this would go to the highest levels of our state. We would be talking here about the sabotage of South Africa's electricity infrastructure by senior ANC politicians. And that is not only a national crisis, but if you're talking about treason, that is where you should be looking. And so I think it is very important for the people of South Africa to know who this person is, what the evidence looks like, and critically, why there have been apparently no arrests or follow-up on these complaints.
Okay, so you've confirmed that you've lodged that PAIA application. Don't these PAIA applications normally take quite a long time?
Actually not. The DA is quite experienced with how this process works. You may recall the court case we recently won against the ANC over the cadre deployment records, which was also a PAIA application. So what the law says is that when it comes to a public institution like Eskom, they have 30 days to respond to this particular request. If there is a refusal to share the information, there must be an opportunity for an appeal, which is also another 30 days. And it is after that then that should there be still a refusal which contravenes the provisions of PAIA, that legal action can be launched. But the reality is that PAIA is a very powerful weapon. And we saw the response to Mr. De Ruyter actually starting to make public some of this information, because knowledge is power, and that is what PAIA is about. So there are very, very few reasons that Eskom could conceivably have to keep this information a secret now that the public is aware that this allegation is out there. And so we don't foresee any rational legal argument that can be used to withhold this information. In fact, if you look at PAIA, the default is always in the interest of transparency and making information available. So we are confident that we've complied with the requirements of the Act, and that we'll soon be able to share more information with South Africa about who this person is and why they're still freely walking the streets.
So when it comes to the evidence, because the ANC and also some other political parties are saying, well, Mr. De Ruyter, where is the evidence? Now, we know that a lot of information, potential evidence around these coal mafias has been handed over to authorities. We have seen some arrests. I think De Ruyter, though, in that interview said not enough has happened. It's not clear what, if anything, De Ruyter has given to the authorities about this so-called high-placed political individual. What is your understanding of whether information around this particular individual has been handed over at all?
Well, what we do know, Sally, from the interview itself, is that Mr. De Ruyter says that he directly told another minister in government that here's the name of the person, and this is, this is the person basically heading up this kind of mafia-style organization, and that the response he received was one which suggested that the minister was aware. So he said something like, or she, I suppose, said something like, I'm not surprised that this information is coming out. So clearly, in that instance, if there is a general awareness among senior ANC politicians about one of their kin's involvement in this, then that suggests that there's much more behind this story than just an allegation. And I would also highlight here that the requirement in terms of the Prevention of Corrupt Activities Act for someone to report when they are aware of corruption is also a watertight one in our law. It seems from what we know from what Mr. De Ruyter has said that he not only reported this to his political principal in the form of this minister, but that there have been a range of charges or complaints that have been filed with investigating authorities. If it is true that a minister is aware of a colleague who is heading up a crime syndicate that is destroying South Africa's electricity system, then that minister, him or herself, may very well also be in violation of the Prevention of Corrupt Activities Act.
In terms of his duty as a CEO, I mean, there's governance duties as well as the obligations you've mentioned. One would then imagine, surely, that Andre De Ruyter would have reported this to the police as well. I'm not just talking about the coal mafia stuff, which we know was handed over to the authorities. I'm talking about specifically this allegation around political involvement. We don't know that for sure, or do you?
Well, the circumstantial evidence, I think, is strong. We've seen from his own version that Mr. De Ruyter says that many of these allegations have been forwarded to the law enforcement authorities. But I think it's so important here to remember how Minister Mantashe specifically has responded to the cleanup efforts at Eskom over the years, and especially over recent months. So when the minister complains that the CEO of Eskom is acting like a policeman, that surely indicates that there is a serious attempt at actually policing the corruption that's taking place, that's emanating from Eskom, and that particular minister is apparently not very happy about it. So we have all of that circumstantial evidence about the apparent seriousness of the cleanup attempt at Eskom, not only relating to coal mafia, but a range of interventions against corruption there, to the point where an ANC minister starts complaining that the CEO is acting like a policeman. If you triangulate that with the allegations that the ANC is now throwing around in response to Mr. De Ruyter, the clearly panicked state, I would say, that they find themselves in, as well as the apparent knowledge from a senior cabinet minister that there is a senior ANC politician behind this mafia, all of that brings together a very disturbing picture, which we would like to confirm through our PAIA application, that load shedding and the electricity crisis is not an accident that the ANC government is trying to fix, but that it is the consequence of the sabotage and corruption within the ANC that we are all living with on a daily basis.
Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. The DA's Leon Schreiber. And speaking of the ANC's response, the ANC, of course, coming out quite strongly against Andre de Ruyter, saying, like other company CEOs, his political opinion, as they put it, should be kept private. Here's ANC Secretary